Hello everybody and welcome to number 7 of our Python tutorial exercises. Right now we're still taking a look at Lambda functions. Okay. So recall from the last video, our Lambda functions are just a quicker way to create a regular Python function. Okay. So in this example, what we're trying to do, if you look at the instructions, we're just trying to create another Lambda function called rapid, and it'll take one string as a parameter, right? So it's going to be able to accept one piece of data. Okay. But look at number 2, it's very interesting here. We want to return the same string, but we want to remove the last letter. Okay. So let's take a look at our file here. You see that this is the Lambda function that we're going to create. You see how it's being called. And notice that it gets called the same way as you would a regular function. Okay. We still open up our parentheses for our parameters. And look, we're passing in a string Bob. Okay. And based on these instructions, what should get returned back is just BO. So we should get back Bo. Okay. We want to remove the last letter from any string that we pass in. Okay. So first, let's create our Lambda function. So we know that our Lambda function needs a couple things. We're told in instructions that we need to call it rapid. So let's go ahead and type out rapid here. And what are we going to do? We want to assign it a Lambda function. So remember, we need the Lambda keyword. Okay. And after the Lambda keyword, this is where the number of parameters are determined. Okay. Since we're dealing with strings and we want to take out just one, maybe a good variable name will be char for a character. Okay. Colon. Now, so far we named our Lambda function and we assigned it to our variable rapid. Okay. And it accepts one parameter. Okay, so far so good. So we know when we look at line 5, we know that this will satisfy so far, right? It takes one parameter. So now what do we want to do with this string that gets passed in? We want to return it, but without the last character, okay? So now this brings us into a topic of what's called slicing. Okay? And Python has this really cool way to slice through strings, and we're going to see what that means. So first, let me comment out that so we can see what slicing is all about. And let me comment out this part. Okay. So before we continue with the question, here's an example of slicing. We can create a variable, let's call it word, and let's assign it some string. Let's say A, B, C, D, E. Okay. What slicing is it returns your string however you decide to split it up. So for example, and we split it up with this notation. And let's just print the result to the console. So let's slice our variable word because we know it contains the string A, B, C, D, E. In order to slice it, we need to open up our square brackets right next to our variable. Okay, that contains our data. And let's say we want to just return B, C, D, E. Okay. What we need to realize here is that our strings are also indexed, starting with 0. Okay. So, and I'm going to draw this out so you get a visual of what's actually going on. But if we just want to return B, C, D, E, we need to start at index 1 and not at index 0. Because our strings start at index 0. Okay. I know that's a little confusing at first, but when we start at index 1, we're really starting at B. Okay. So we're starting at B. So the first parameter is the start point. The second parameter is the end point. And since we just want the entire string, we're just going to iterate all the way through. So we don't need to pass in any parameter here. Just our colon again. And then the last parameter is how many steps you want to take. Since we just want to go one step at a time, and we don't want to jump around, 5 steps every single time, we're just going to leave it blank. Okay. So if I run this, I compile this, you see we just get B, C, D, E. Okay. Because our starting point was at 1, right? At index 1. So let's say I wanted to change this up and I wanted to stop at index 0, 1, 2, 3. Whoops. I want to stop at index 3. Now you might think, well, since we're starting at index 1, which is B, and we want to stop at index 3, that index 3 is also going to be included. But when we look, we're expecting in our head right now 0, index 0, 1, 2, 3. We're expecting B, C, D. But when I compile this, we just get B, C. Okay. So our ending point, which is this parameter, this index is not included. Okay. So if you wanted to include D, then we just need to stop it at the index 1 above it. See, now when we stop at index 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, our fourth index is not included, and it's always 1 less. Okay, this is how we get BCD. So now I'm going to graphically show what's actually happening here. So when we have a string, like A, B, C, D, E, these are still indexed, starting from 0, 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Okay. So this string value is still being able to get indexed. Okay. So that's how, and let's say we assign this to our word variable. Okay. So that's how when we're able to slice, we just grab our word and we open up our square brackets and we're able to slice. Okay. So visually looking at this now, and if I tell you just grab letters A through C, then you know, since we're starting at the beginning, we don't need to specify what index we're starting at, we just leave it blank. So right now you can think of this as a 0 right now because we're starting at the first index. And we know we want to stop at C. So we know that if we want to include C, that we need to just stop. Our stopping point needs to be 1 ahead of it, which needs to be 3. And since we know we want every single one by one, we're also going to leave our increment value blank, which by default increments 1 at a time. Okay. So that's what slicing does. It returns you a string of your current string. That's what's called, the technical term is called the substring. Okay, so slicing returns a substring. Okay. Now, if you want, you can also return the entire string as well. That's fine as well. Okay. If you wanted to do that, then this would just be blank. You would just have the word, our square brackets, and then our both of our dots here, 2 sets of dots, right? Now, the purpose for our question, we saw that we want to just get rid of the last one. We want to return our entire word, but we just want to get rid of the last one. Okay. Now, Python is also indexed starting from 0 and incrementing by 1. But Python also has negative indexing. And what that means is, let me write this on the side. We can have the same word I'm just doing the same thing, same string. But now we can have it, we can index by negative numbers. What that means is the very last character of any string, we can access it with the -1 index. I'm sure you can guess what's going to happen here. Now D can be accessed at -2, and C can be accessed at -3. Okay, and A is accessed at -5. So Python has two ways of indexing: just the regular normal way, starting from 0 all the way through, and this really cool way of negative indexing, where the last character of any string, we know we can get it with the -1 index. So with that new knowledge now, we know what we have to do, right? We know slicing returns a string, and we know we want to return the string just without the last index. So we know our answer is going to need our slicing notation, and we just need to mess around with our starting value, our stopping value, and in our case, we want to return the entire string, so we could just leave this blank. And remember, this is our increment value. Okay. So let's go back to our question here. Let me erase this example. And let's get back to where we were. Okay. So we know we want to return a string just without the last index. So we know that back to our lambda function, when we call it, we're passing in Bob. Okay. And our parameter here is char for our lambda function. So now char represents Bob. Okay. What do we want to do? We just want to return whatever word gets passed in this case is going to be Bob, and we want to increment from the beginning until we get to the last index. And we know that our stopping position, right, our stopping index is not included, right, just like we saw with the example. So when I compile this, you see we just get BO, okay? And this satisfies this question. We could pass in more letters. We're going to get back our entire string, except we're going to not have the G. We're not going to include the G. See? Everything gets included up until the stopping point, which is the last index. And remember, our stopping point, that specific index is not included. Okay, it always stops one before. Okay, so let's put back Bob and let's run our test case. And you see we pass our test cases. Okay, so that wraps it up for this one. I'll see you in the next video.